Okay, welcome back. Let's talk about our control room layout. How much room do we need to allow for our off-grid inverter system and batteries? Well, one thing to keep in mind, National Electric Code requires dedicated electrical space. So your gas vents, plumbing vents, air conditioner ducts, all this stuff has to be in a separate location than the actual plane of your required electrical space. Our room will need to be ventilated, and we'll get into what that means in a little bit. Uh, there's two different requirements, so we'll see what that means. The ventilation requirements show up in a couple of different spots in National Electric Code. There is a dedicated section for batteries after the solar section, so in section 705 rather than 690 for solar. But like we learned in our NEC class, code is repetitive. So a lot of times the specialty requirements that are required for a special piece of equipment appear as general requirements for in the earlier sections of code. And we'll take a look at that. There's two fire codes that drive battery room design. One is IFC, which is International Fire Code, and the other is NFPA, which is National Fire Code. And their requirements are slightly different. And so International Fire Code is actually a little bit more strict. So what IFC requires is that for flooded lead acid, the ventilation system shall be designed to limit the maximum concentration of hydrogen to 1% of the total room volume, and continuous ventilation shall be provided at a rate of not less than 1 cubic foot per metered squared foot of floor area of the room. And effectively what this means is two things. One, a ventilated room, that could be an air-conditioned room, a room that has air handling put into it. But two, the ventilation needs to be continuous. And that's where ventilation, where you're just relying on a standard air conditioner, won't cut it, because it's not a continuous air duct that's constantly draining the room. So under these two definitions, the definition one, you can say, okay, well, we'll let the room fill up with hydrogen, and periodically we'll vent the room to the outside, and provided we stay within a allowance, that'll be okay. But condition two says you need continuous ventilation. That's where on a sealed battery you don't have these ventilation requirements. This is only for flooded lead acid, nickel cadmium, or a kind of lead acid battery called valve regulated lead acid, which produces less emissions than flooded lead acid. It's kind of a compromise between a sealed and an unsealed battery, and it's more expensive and it has a shorter life. And then a sealed battery is even more expensive and has even a shorter life. By the time you get into sealed batteries, either you're just trying to go for the lowest budget possible and have a small battery, at which point you're doing a sealed lead acid, or it's not a bad idea if you're looking at sealed lead acid to go ahead and consider springing for the lithium-ion technology. VRLA is kind of a good halfway in between point in terms of budget and maintenance. You might only need to water the batteries instead of once a week or once every 2 weeks during periods of heavy use. Valve regulated acid batteries may only need to be watered every 2 months. So a little bit easier on the maintenance. It's still a off-gassed battery. We have some other fire code requirements besides just ventilation. We have to prevent access to unauthorized personnel. And so your batteries just cannot be hanging out in the floor of your garage. They have to be, if they're in your garage, if they're not in a dedicated cabinet, then they need to be in a dedicated room that's locked. So, they have to be secure. You can't just have your kids getting home from, sports practice and, walking right by the batteries, having them be exposed to contact. They have to be in a secured area. You have to have spill control and neutralization for free-flowing batteries. So that's pretty much when you get into these off-grid batteries, 50 gallons or greater, you need spill control. Which might mean that you need to have kind of the batteries not just be on the floor or on top of a pallet, but maybe on top of a rubber mat with a sealed lip around it. So that if the batteries tip over and spill, that the lead acid spillage is contained. Thermal runaway protection, what's that? Well, basically, it's that your batteries need to have a temperature sensor on them. That's not a very expensive piece. Your batteries are going to have a temperature monitor on them, even on the cheaper off-grid inverters. It's very common. It's like a $12 item. They sell it as an add-on, but it's not really an add-on. On your more expensive battery inverters, it's not just an alarm. It actually will adjust the settings on the battery inverters so that they will operate and run your battery differently. We'll learn about temperature considerations for batteries, and we'll learn that if they freeze, in freezing conditions, you don't want to discharge your battery more than 50%. And then under hot temperatures, they actually gain a little bit of storage capacity. So the temperature sensor can provide additional functionality than just making sure that the batteries aren't overheating. And then sealed batteries, lithium-ion batteries, don't have these ventilation requirements. So if you're in, say, a apartment complex, and your battery is going to go in a closet and you don't have that ventilation to the outside, that's where you may have to go for a more expensive battery. Now, International Fire Code is more strict. It requires the 1 and 2 requirements for not letting the hydrogen in the room fill up to 1%. And also having a continuous ventilation. If you're not subject to IFC and you're just subject to National Fire Protection, it's an either-or option. And it's kind of the same requirements, either that 1% of hydrogen concentration, which I'm sure there's a way to monitor that. I don't really know what it is. For my one off-grid system, it's just been, well, is the room air-conditioned? Yes. Well, okay. But at the same time, we have to make sure that that air conditioner is not turning off, like in the spring or maybe in the winter. It's, well, am I going to heat that air-conditioned room? Or in the springtime, am I going to run my air conditioner at all? Well, you have to, if you're relying on your air conditioner to be that vent to the outside. What you may want to do instead is to have a dedicated fan that turns on and blows the air out of the room. And then when you get into the continuous ventilation, be provided at a not less than the rate of 1 cubic feet per meter square foot of floor area. That's where sealing the batteries or putting a vent hood over them, putting them in a dedicated cabinet space, reduces the square footage requirement of that ventilation. So you can get away with having, a very small dedicated air handling unit that is just for the batteries if they are in a dedicated cabinet with little caps that go over the tops of the cells to capture the gas. You put a little vent hood, almost like a kitchen vent hood, over the batteries. And they produce most of their gas when they're undergoing heavy charge cycles. And so, you can run this ventilation continuously, and you may ramp it up during periods of charging or discharging. So, I'm really not an expert on air handling and determining, what kind of air conditioner system will, per square foot, will satisfy the 1% requirement. So it is something to be aware of. There's some firewall rating requirements for rooms where there's kids. Temperature sensors being required on the batteries as well. So a lot of the IFC and the NFPA requirements are similar to each other. So the battery environment shall be controlled to maintain temperatures in a safe operating range for the specific battery used. Lead acid will generally give you an operating range where the batteries can be all the way down to freezing temperatures, even below freezing temperatures. They can get hot. They can be in 90-degree weather. So unlike, say, a lithium-ion battery, where you may get the manufacturer saying you have to keep it out of the sun, you have a little bit more operating range with lead acid. Even so, we see the fire code saying, hey, if that battery is rated for 77 degrees, it may not be part of National Electric Code. You may be able to, it may not be part of the manufacturer requirement to say, well, it's rated for 77 degrees, but it can handle up to 90. If you're going to keep it in a 90-degree environment, it needs to be rated for 90 degrees. If you're building a box and keeping the battery outside, you may want to think about putting a small air conditioner in that box. And the thing is, you go and look at, say, portable air conditioner units. I picked one up at a kind of a bargain hunt store. I got let's see, it's actually sitting right next to me. I think I was 5,000 BTU. I don't think it was this more robust one here. But I was able, yeah, here we go, this one. I was able to get, this is a window unit. So I was able to get this. Window units are a little bit cheaper. What I like are the portable air conditioners. So it wasn't exactly this one. It was something like this. I actually got mine for 120 bucks. And the reason why I like this is that it'll suck the humidity out of the air and collect water. So, if you're keeping your batteries in a garage and there's no plumbing and you're going to have to be watering these batteries, you can design an air conditioner system to, come on during the day, ventilate the room, air conditioner the room when the batteries are at a full state of charge, and also create the water that you need to water the batteries. Get some synergy going, and then at the same time, you still might need another fan that's providing continuous ventilation to the outside. Oh, sorry. So this is kind of what the portable units look like. A window unit could work well too. They will produce water. Generally, they drain their water directly to the outside, but let's see, HAIR. You know, what I like about my portable air conditioner unit is that it'll also function as a heater in the winter time. You know, heater, dehumidifier, fan. You know, you can keep these things always on. You don't want to overkill it. You know, one that's smaller is going to draw less power. So I guess the takeaway that I wanted to point out was that your air conditioner can be used to also generate the water that you need for watering your batteries. And you know what? All of your system components will improve their performance if they're in air conditioning. I mean, your inverters, yeah, you can't have them be outside.
I need your help.
Okay. All right, I'm going to have to pause the broadcast for a minute. So we'll be back in a little bit.
Everyone take
I'm going to keep streaming, but I'm going to stop the recording.
Smoke them if you got